we get going?
Good idea, Jesper.
All right. So welcome to this webinar. The topic of the webinar today is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. You all know predictive index, I presume, and you know the value of predictive index in a number of areas in a company, starting from recruitment to onboarding to development and so on. There's one very important part that you can also use predictive index for, and that is to support your DEI initiatives that I'm sure all of you are already doing in your companies. At Humanostics, we work with Lizzie, and Lizzie has developed some really interesting thoughts on this topic on how to practically include and introduce and work with DEIB in your companies. And I'll hand over the word to Lizzie I know, Lizzie, you have a lot on your mind on this topic here, so I won't steal more of your time. Take it away, Lizzie.
Thank you so much, Jesper, for that kind introduction, and welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to see you. I've been looking forward to sharing my thoughts on how we can use the predictive index to support and strengthen our initiatives in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Apart from being an associate partner of Humanostics, I'm also the founder of the company Dive-Ignite, and it is in that capacity that we've developed a framework to help companies and guide them through the journey towards a more dive-oriented culture. So what we're gonna take you through today is a brief introduction where I'm gonna share a couple of insights on the typical blocks and challenges that people are facing. Just to let you know that you're probably sitting with some of those and you're absolutely not alone. After that, a high-level journey through the process that's called Dive-Ignite 2515, with a specific focus on US PI clients and how we can use our PI platform to support our dive initiatives and dive work. So a practical thing, you will get the slides, of course, afterwards, and they are interactive, so there are links to various relevant issues along the way. And if you have any questions, then post them in the chat, and we will be trying to answer them before we end, or we will answer them in the email when you receive the slides. So that's the practical issues. So what blocks our dive initiatives? Well, last year we asked a large number of Danish companies what were their biggest problems getting started on the dive agenda. And these four elements really stood out as things that people struggled the most with. First and most, it was the business case for dive. What is the actual business case? How do we convince our business to use money on this agenda? Second, having a clear strategic direction was really something that people struggled with. Either they did not have any or they did not know how to sort of define it. Then clear goals and framework, really following the lack of strategic direction, obviously was also something that people found hard to sort of really actualize. And finally, basic understanding of which skills do we need, what kind of behavior is actually supporting dive, and which tools are required to even drive the dive agenda. Also, last year we saw a really interesting survey from Lily Zheng. She's writing for Forbes, and it was published in Harvard Business Review. And she pointed out 4 key areas that was central when dive initiatives were failing. And you can read them here, and you will probably see them as pretty logic. And still, it's quite mind-baffling that this is still the issue we're looking at when different initiatives are failing from people and culture side. First of all, leadership commitment. Goes without saying, and it's still true. If the leadership is not committed, things will not fly. Clear goals, clear success indicators. If people don't feel, or if they cannot see tangible results from their efforts, they will give up. They will start focusing their efforts on something that they can see is materializing into something concrete. Understanding of dive is also an issue here. it's not only you as practitioners that is looking into a very large and for many also quite intangible area. This, of course, drizzles down to the rest of the organization. It's a vast topic, and we get new words and new angles almost every week, even if we work with it daily. So general understanding of DIVE is definitely something that is making things more difficult for DIVE practitioners out there. And finally, the lack of active allyship in the organizations. So everything from completely denying that inequality exists in an organization to the lack of courage and ability to address resistance, unconscious bias, and to even fight down the barriers of success when you encounter them. So on this basis, and with that in mind, we developed a very simple framework for people who want to initiate and work with DIVE in a simple manner without it becoming a big monster. This is a very simple process, and it's designed to make it easy and very actionable for people to start on their DIVE journey. It looks like this. It's called DIVE Ignite 2-5-15 because it consists of 3 sessions of 2, 5, and 15 hours. I'm going to take you through a very brief introduction to each of these sessions, and of course the whole time with a specific focus on how and why can we use PI in this context. So starting off with the strategy session, where we're looking at the overall intent and goals of the organization. This session, we are focusing on what we call executive management. It's typically up to 5 persons. And the biggest imperative here is that we are working with decision makers, people that own the agenda, that have the capacity and the mandate to take a strategic direction, make a strategic decision, and to also allocate the budget that the company wants to use. Here, we introduce the business case and the general introduction of the DIVE mindset. Again, remembering that one of the biggest obstacles is that people simply do not know enough of this agenda. So to make sure that everybody knows the big why and also what is the ROI or the bottom line on this initiative. Then we work out your company's DIVE declaration of intent or overall strategic direction. And we look at setting the overall framework of your DIVE goals and resources. Sharing some of the main areas of focus that we use or go through in the introduction and business case. I use this metaphor when starting out with people talking about DIVE. I'm asking them to look at your organization like a car. And imagine that your people is the engine of this car. If that is so, then the DIVE agenda would be your ignition. This is what gets the whole thing started. So this is our sort of overall metaphor for how we can talk about DIVE in the organization. In terms of the business case, we always start out by talking about diversity, because diversity is something that most of us are very comfortable with. We've been talking about diversity for many, many years now. And there is a general misconception that diversity is a good thing. Well, actually, research and experience shows us that that is not the case. Research alone creates friction. It creates fragmentation. So for diversity to be a positive contributor to the company's culture and bottom line, we need to have a strong inclusion, because once we add the inclusion factor to the diversity, then we see a boost of our results by up to 60%. So here, I hope it's very evident that we have to use and work with the whole agenda in order to get to the positive results that lie in a culture based on DIVE principles. So prioritizing DIVE, as we talk about, is not only a right thing to do from a moral or an ethical standpoint, it's also a very smart business decision. And this is what we need to be able to address, especially as people and culture or DIVE practitioners. At large, we know now that DIVE increases innovation, productivity, and profitability. And it does that by increasing engagement and morale, commitment, loyalty, our mental health, the psychological safety, how our ability to attract and retain the talent, make better and more efficient decisions faster, and even our external brand reputation and customer loyalty is something that is increased when we work and have a strong dive culture. Another area we see decreasing, that is costs for recruiting. It's mistakes and errors in the organization, discrimination and harassment. It's the level of bias in the organization, and it's also legal cases against the organization. And we use quite some time going into depth with how is this and to what extent do we see that when we work through the business case. This is an example of one of the many very interesting figures that we see coming out of recent surveys. 80% of employees wants to work with companies that values and promotes DIVE. 80% of employees. That is a very large portion of your possible and potential future co-workers. And a lot of people you can either attract or scare off. These are 4 of the cornerstones looking at diverse cultures and inclusive cultures. We see companies with inclusive cultures having an increased ability to exceed their financial targets, to be high performing. Their innovation ability goes up as well as their agility. And in general, we see that they are up to 8 times more likely to actually achieve better business outcomes. All in all, very strong indicators for any business, I would say, to say, well, we can't afford not to look into this agenda and not to strengthen our culture with more inclusivity. To help you do your own calculations, because that's always very important for any organization, PI has actually developed 2 very, I love these 2 tools. This one is the first one, the disengagement cost calculator. This is one of the slides where I told you they're interactive. So when you receive the slides and you click here in this area, you're directed directly towards this online tool. It's free of cost, doesn't require you to register for anything. You just have to plot in your own numbers, and then it will calculate for you the actual cost of your disengagement in the organization, looking at the lost productivity and replacement costs. And the reason for why that is important is, for example, this survey by Berg and Dillon pointing towards inclusive teams being up to 80% more likely to report high levels of engagement. So if you are looking at low levels of engagement in your company, well, it's not only extremely costly, it is also something that will hurt your ability to attract new and more employees. Gallup, as you can see in the bottom, equals studies with extremely high rates and high costs of disengagement. Another cost calculator that you can use from the PI, which is also free and same as the other one, you just click and you're directed towards it, and you can put in your own numbers, is the turnover cost calculator. Again, we see inclusive cultures, organizations where employees are actually being listened to. They are 12 times more likely to engage and retain their people. And these are corner elements of any diverse and inclusive culture. So get your own numbers down, look into these turnover cost calculators or the other one, and get your figures straight before you start initiating this agenda. If you haven't done it before, this is what we will do during the 2-hour process of the strategy session. The CSRD requirements, we go through them. As you probably all know, they are coming up now fast, the first deadlines, depending on your size and how you're listed. The EU's Gender Balance Directive have a deadline coming up here in June in 2026. It seems far away right now, but from the current pace we've been tracking for the past 10 years, this seems to be practically and invariably impossible for organizations to reach these goals. So we are busy on this agenda, and the reason why the pedal is hitting the metal right now is because people are actually looking into potentially getting penalized for not reaching these targets. So a very, very hard business case and reason for doing this. We look into the dive direction and framework, making a very simple declaration of intent on your dive. We, of course, show you a lot of examples so you can get some inspiration, and we have a framework for how can we get you towards a simple but yet clear declaration of intent on your dive work. Once you have that, we're going to look at the overall goals. What is it you're steering towards? What kind of budget are you able to allocate and willing to allocate? And do you seem, based on the business case, relevant to allocate? What is your timeline, and also what are your resources? And that could be resources in terms of people, of course. Do you have the right people? Do you have enough people? Do you lack any specific skills in this area? But also, which tools do you have at your disposal? As for example, do you have PI platform? Do you have other tools that you can use to support it? Now, that was the strategy session. So now that you know where you're going, we need to figure out how to get you there. We need to plan the journey. And that's where we move into talking about tactics, where we specifically talk about how to translate your intent into actions. Here again, brief introduction of the intro and the business case. Now for a larger group of professionals in your company, those that are the owners of this whole agenda, those that have to get the ball rolling and will do the overall management of your DIVE initiatives. And we're going to, of course, present the declaration of intent, goals, and framework. And we're going to start specifically translating your intent into your actions with a focus on how you can use the PI tools. We start off by this little exercise. I love it. It's actually part of the rollout when we do the engagement survey in PI. So if you're using that already, you will recognize some of these questions, talking about what does success look like when you reach your DIVE perspective, your DIVE goals, and what steps will most likely help you to succeed. And then, of course, what are the immediate challenges that will prevent you from succeeding? Already here, we start talking about the obstacles that you look into, and it will start clarifying what needs do we have, what tools do we need to start to tap into. Then we move over to the mindset, skill set, and tool set of DIVE, just to make sure we're all in the same place. Normally in this group of people, everybody have a quite clear understanding of the overall DIVE mindset, but of course it's important that we're all on the same page. So repeat that. What is diversity? It's the range of identities within our organization. Equity, meaning that we treat everybody fair and that everybody have equal opportunities to succeed. When we talk about inclusion, we mean that everybody feels seen, respected, represented, and actually also valued. And finally, belonging, where everybody feels accepted and also included in their day-to-day work. Then we add the skill set, and we lean on active allyship as the core and most simple skill set that we can lean on. And we use the research of Dr. Purnima Luthra, who is an associate professor at CBS, working closely together with Sarah Louise Moore. And together, these two wonderful ladies are amongst the world leading capacities in the field of diversity and inclusion. And Dr. Purnima, she defined this active allyship and 7 behaviors that constitutes an active ally. Now, one of the reasons why we use active allyship as the core is because, as you can see here, the power of active allyship is enormous. I mean, it's simply enormous. Up to 170% of employees in a culture with strong allyship is more likely to recommend the organization as a great place to work. So it goes without saying that this is a very, very strong tool. Now, looking at the first 3 behaviors, deep curiosity, honest introspection, and humble acknowledgement. These 3 are primarily directed towards giving you more information about yourself and also increase your understanding of other people. And it's out of the knowledge that the more we understand something, the less afraid of it we are, and the less resistance we will see in the organization. So here, obviously, it becomes very easy to integrate PR. The tools that I prefer to use in this part of the program is the snapshot depicted down here to the left. Wonderful one-pager where you have the link to the video of a given profile. It highlights your strengths and your challenges in your self-awareness, and it also highlights how you perform at work, what are your strengths and what is your primary contribution at work. Similarly, the traditional behavioral profile is also a very good instrument to offering more of a self-insight. I especially love it as a dialogue tool. when people before a meeting perhaps have looked into it, and we start talking about what they see as a really good match to themselves and how they can't recognize themselves in some of it. The placard here, I hope that all of you are familiar with and also in love with. Here at the Humanostics head office, everybody has their placard at their station. And as a bulldozer maverick like I am, this is a very big help, because I talk and I make a lot of noise and I fill out the room and the 3 rooms next to me. So having this reminder like in my face, who I'm standing in front of, it does help me, believe it or not, it does help me to pipe down a little bit and to try and adjust my approach to the person that I'm facing. And finally, of course, the personal development chart, a wonderful tool to increase personal insight and to help people either coach themselves or be coached by others. And what we do here is talk about during the tactics sessions, what kind of policies and practices do you have? How could we add these instruments into some of the things that you already do, so that it simply becomes an add-on and a qualified way of moving your agenda towards a more unbiased and fact-based basis, rather than just us being nice to each other and talking to each other, but be able to address some of the core elements of our self-awareness and also our ability to understand and also appreciate behavioral differences. For the last 4 of these behaviors, well, they're more focused towards how we interact with others, either on a one-on-one basis or on a team basis, and also how I act towards others as an active ally. Again, we can look at a different set of tools here in the PI toolbox. These are, as you can see here, more of it's the team-based tools, the relationship-based tools. So we're looking at the relationship guide for the one-on-one dialogues. We're looking at these 3 here, the leadership development guide, the coaching guide, and the management guide. Great tools for any team leader to be really familiar with and use in different contexts to ensure that the person they sit in front of is being coached on an unbiased account and out of a true desire to understand and make the person succeed in the best way possible, without any infliction of who they are, where they're coming from, what they believe, how they look, or what kind of abilities or disabilities they have, but a true unbiased and fact-oriented basis. And then, of course, for the larger team, it could be a team in a department, a full department. It could be a project team. It could be an employee resource group. Looking into the team discovery and team analytics tools can be so valuable to support the communication in general, your interpersonal relationships, and of course, your teamwork in general. And again, here, talking about how does these tools then address these 4 behaviors is very hands-on, very actionable, and it becomes more than just talking about how do we then practice active allyship. We have some very specific tools to help us live out these 7 central behaviors of an inclusive culture. Then when we talked about the mindset and the skill set, we have another tool set, which we prefer and that we can see is one of the most some of the most successful actions that people that are having strong inclusive cultures are using. They implement employee resource groups, they have inclusive policies and practices, and they also practice mentorship. And for each of these 3 groups, we also have a very strong use of the PI platform. So for employee resource groups, well, their primary perspective is to advocate the underrepresented groups, the minorities they represent, and to help increase the opportunities they get within the workplace of that specific group. We do like to see leaders in these groups also, and for that reason, we have, again, a variety of tools. Some of them is towards me, the relationship guide, how do I interact with other people? We have the management development tools, so how do I interact as a manager so that I'm self-aware of how I interact, so I can be the best possible facilitator of this group. not being, if I'm a maverick, I have to really tune down my A in these groups. I have to pop out my ears. I do have 2 ears, but because I'm a maverick, I talk while I listen. I have to not do that if I'm the leader in the employee resource groups. I have to look into how to use the more supportive side of the A and so forth. And again, of course, the team building tools, making small team discovery sessions as a starting or kickoff session for an employee resource group is really wonderful. Helping them to see their differences in terms of how they distribute on the analysis in the whole team. Are we all completely risk willing, or are we somebody that is, for example, in this case, everybody is extremely risk willing except for one? So how do we balance this in the group so that everybody already from the get-go feels that we really want to include everybody, and that everything and every contribution in the group is strong and valid. The next tool, the inclusive policies and practices. Here we of course talk to you. Do you already have some? How do they look? If you're a little bit more novice in this area, we have a lot of examples of policies and practices for inclusive cultures. One of the examples that we share with people is obviously, of course, the value of having it, but also something as simple as an email signature. Now I've taken my own here, and from this way of making my signature, you can see that I open up for a lot of different things on the DIVE agenda. First of all, I add my pronouns after my name. Those of you active on LinkedIn, you've already seen that. Many of you probably already have it. People have the she, her, they, them, he, him after their name in order to indicate to other people how I wish to be addressed. Then, as a PI aficionado, I have added information about my PI profile. I even have a link to the video of my profile because I think it's fun that people can read, that can listen to some of the key elements of being a maverick. And then I've added some of the things that I think fits me most when I'm looking into the maverick description. And finally, I also added something that's perhaps a little bit more vulnerable. The first thing seems quite easy and not so vulnerable. I say I use a lot of descriptive words and emoticons when I write. And I also write in a very big font because my eyesight is very poor. Well, to me, that is very vulnerable because my eyesight is very poor because of an injury I got when I got kicked in the head many years ago. And I also have a speech impairment. I can't remember a shitload of strange things. So I use this in my signature. So another very easy way to get PI out and living and make it fun for people to know their profile and make them curious into, oh my God, what kind of, oh, that's a maverick, okay. That's a fun little thing to work with. And it's very easy. You can do it this afternoon if you want to. And of course, talking about inclusive policies and practices, we can't talk about that without talking about the employee engagement survey. It is an amazing tool to create awareness and actionable insights. And if your company is using it or want to use it, there are a lot of specific statements that when we go into the engagement survey and we cross those statements with some of the optional data that you can add on your community when you make the survey, you can get some really, really strong pinpoints into where do you have some strengths in your organization already, and where perhaps do you have some challenges on the DIVE agenda. So we can really reach for these low-hanging fruits and create a lot of instant success and tangible results, which is one of the core elements asked for by your employees when you start these initiatives. Mentorship, logically, informal and formal mentorship is hugely supported by PI. When we talk about mentorship on a DIVE agenda, it's focused on the underrepresented groups to help them feel included and valued, and to make sure that they benefit and take advantage of all the initiatives that we have in the organization, because that is a big challenge, that we have groups in the organizations that simply do not use the things that we are offering. And that goes for anything from the pension scheme to the trainings we're offering and everything in between. And when we're looking at formal or informal mentorship, again, the one-on-one guide, relationship guide, amazing tool. The individual and the manager and the personal development charts, depending on what type of employee you are coaching. The coaching guide looking towards the job. If somebody feels that they are either stressed out in their current job, or if they're looking towards a new job, coach them up against that if possible. And finally, of course, the management strategy guide, making people aware of how they actually prefer to be managed, is an insanely efficient tool when we talk about creating an inclusive culture. Feeling allowed and able to talk about how I want to be managed is something that is extremely difficult for so many people, and this actually gives them the tool to do it in an easy and the way we implement it, very, very fun way. And we'll talk to you about that. Then we move on to operations. And in operations, again, we have a larger group. This is leaders, the key stakeholders, the dive champions, or all of your employees. We do it in groups of 20 persons, and it's really up to you and how you decide to roll it out. That decides who is going to be present. But as you can see, it's a bit of the same. Here we repeat sort of the main things about diversity and inclusion. What is it? Why do we do it? Again, everybody has to be on board. They understand the benefits that we can get out of this, both on a personal level and on an organizational level. And then we talk about where we're going and which goals we have set, and also the specific actions and tools. And the rest of the time, we talk with this group about how what you do and say matters, and how we use the tools that we have chosen to support the agenda. And of course, we train them in using these tools so everybody feels safe and very accomplished when using them. So basically, in the operational part, we put all the pieces together, the strategy, the tactics, and then getting ready to roll out the training activities and strengthen the general active allyship and build a dive culture that can really strengthen you and also give you something very specific to report on for those of you that are looking into the reporting requirements already in 2024. This is the overview, the active allyship, which goes on the actual behavior, and then these three specific tool areas, the mentorship, employee resource groups, and inclusive policies and practices. This is sort of the palette that we're drawing upon when we use the implementation focus here in the operational part of the session. And of course, we do a follow-up, because every time we implement something, shit happens. Sorry, my French. I'm a maverick, and it's not an excuse, it's a fact. But we have to follow up and see, okay, so from everything that we now did, what is working really well? Where do we see some roadblocks that we didn't see in advance? And how can we rectify it? And are there tools or skills that we need to train further because we didn't foresee that we lacked them or that we wanted them? And then we just keep the ball rolling, so to speak, with these ongoing follow-ups with the relevant stakeholders. So to recap and get you off in time for the deadline here, three main areas. One, how do we get from direction to action on the dive agenda? Two, how do we then live dive in the organization so that it's not just sort of a cross list that you've done in order to be able to report on something in 2024 or later? And finally, what is your dive PI toolset? And just to recap the first one, from direction to action, this is the framework that we're using. The Dive Ignite 2515 in 22 hours, get you up and running and get you started on this agenda in a very, very simple and tangible ways, with some existing tools that make it easy for people to understand where you're going and to see tangible results in a short time. And in terms of number two, living dive, well, here we lean on the active allyship defined by Punima Luthra. In Dive Ignite, we define a program called Dive Ignite Active Allyship, behaving your way into inclusion, where we lean a lot on PI, if you are a PI client, and how in training each of these 7 behaviors is the PI tool relevant? How can you use it? How have you chosen to build it into your practices and policies in the organization? And then finally, this is an overview of your PI toolset. I will not go into detail with it. I'll just scroll through it. But when you get the material afterwards, you will get sort of a more in-depth knowledge of, okay, deep curiosity. how does PI support that, and what is it, and honest introspection and so forth. So you will get this elaboration when you get the slides afterwards, and hopefully that will give you some materials to ponder and dive more into, and of course make you more curious and hungry for using your PI platform to the fullest and really maximize the use of it. I normally say that many of the people I talk to, they use PI a little bit like I use Outlook. Everybody who is a real wizard in Office 365 would cry if they saw how I used Outlook, because I really just use it as a mailbox. And the same things go with PI. Many people focus very much on recruitment and the tools related to that. So the PI BA, CA, and for some also the job assessment. But it's just so much more, and it's right at your fingertips, and it's already there, the data set. You don't have to do anything, you just have to pull it out. So obviously I hope you will get more inspired to using those. And then finally, once the recap is done, I have pulled in some recommended readings. These are my absolute favorite books on the topics. When you click on them, you go to a more in-depth description of it. But it's Purnima Luthra and Sarah Louise Moore, the Danish world-leading experts. It's Amy Edmondson, world-leading expert on psychological safety. You have to read and know about her. Megan Reitz, the same leading expert on employee activism. She's the one talking about how you cannot sit on the fence of employee activism. It's truly an eye-opener. And finally, to the right, we got Covey's latest thoughts on trust and inspire in the organizations, and also from Covey how to work with unconscious bias. So this is just a little setup of inspiration. I love these books because they're all quite action-oriented in each of their field, and they give you a lot of, I think, fun and inspiring knowledge. So with that, I'm off. I don't know if we have any questions. While Imad is looking at that, I can just say, well, reach out and let's talk DAG with you. Reach out to me personally, or reach out to your account manager in Humanostics. We're here to help you use your PI platform to the best of your abilities, and to really help you strengthen your dive agenda in a very easy and hand-on way. Yeah, so that was it from me. I don't know if we have any questions, Imad, or if we should call it a day.
No questions, so I think we are all good.
Well, then we will also finish in time. Thank you everybody for your time, and out and enjoy the sunshine, and hopefully we'll talk to you about dive sometime in the future. Have a nice day.